Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee. On this episode of the CD Junkie, I'm going to talk about Warren Zevon, but more specifically, I'm going to talk about his years with Asylum Records. Now, Warren Zevon, his career goes all the way back to the 60s, mid-60s. He put out singles. He wrote songs for the Turtles. Into the 70s, he worked with the Everly Brothers. He, worked with them together and separately as they pursued solo careers. He found himself in, Spain? I mean, he was not having a lot of financial success, even though he had a song on the Midnight Cowboy soundtrack, even though he put out an album in 1970. But once he returned to L.A., in, I think, probably 75, 76, he hooked up with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks and Jackson Browne, and it all came together, and he released his debut Asylum album in 1976. But before I go into those albums, I like to tell sometimes how I got into an artist, and that is basically, I think, the same way a lot of us did. I don't even remember seeing the self-titled Warren Zevon album in the bins. And I came across Warren Zevon. It was before Werewolves of London became a hit, but I think it had just started getting played on the radio. Some of my friends at school were talking about it, and I got my allowance, and I went and I said, you know what, I've been hearing a lot about this. I mean, I was already into the new wave scene or whatever, so I didn't know what to expect. I just went, okay, I'm going to shell out my money for this album called Excitable Boy in 1978. And immediately I said, oh my gosh, I got to check out more of this guy's stuff. I did a little bit of research. This is 1978. You couldn't get on the internet or, I think I went to like Phonolog, or I asked somebody what other albums he had, and they said he had a self-titled album from 76. And I remember just not being able to find it. I mean, nobody had it because it was not that big of a hit, and it had probably been returned to every record store, a year or two before, and nobody had really caught on to Warren Zevon yet. So, stores weren't bringing it back in stock. I remember, I think that I ended up going to a store in Anaheim, maybe having my mom drive me or my dad or somebody, and I went and I got the self-titled album, which I fell in love with. In fact, I even prefer that album more than Excitable Boy. And Excitable Boy is a great album. So that tells you how great that first album was and is. And that's what I'm talking about right now. That first album, self-titled, produced by Jackson Browne. He's the one who really encouraged Warren to get out there. He knew these great songs. This is the album that has versions of songs that Linda Ronstadt recorded, like Poor, Poor, Pitiful Me and Hasten Down the Wind. But it also had great songs like Desperados Under the Eaves, my favorite song on the album, The French Inhaler, which I believe was David Letterman's favorite Warren Zevon song. Not that I know David Letterman, but I think that's how people remember that song. And it has Frank and Jesse James and Backs Turned Looking Down the Path, and so many great songs. There was such a depth to this album, so many layers. This album, it seemed to be focused on piano. Maybe a lot of the tracks were written on piano, or that's what Warren was focusing on the time. But you had some just great players on this album. I mean, one of the names that seems to pop up a lot in Warren Zevon's career would be like Jorge Calderon. But on this album, you've got Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks, Jackson Browne, Don Henley, Glenn Frey from the Eagles, Waddy Wachtel, David Lindley, so many of those great musicians around that time, who played on Jackson's albums and Eagles albums and stuff. Really a fantastic, really deep sounding, wonderful album, great songwriting. But that didn't do so well commercially. I believe it did get some great reviews at the time, but it didn't really bring him to the public's attention until 1978 when he put out the album Excitable Boy. This was just a pop opus. Now, was it as good as the debut album? I think it's almost as good as the debut album, but I think that this is a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more focused. You've got, Johnny Strikes Up the Band, Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner, Werewolves of London, Lawyers, Guns, and Money. There's a lot of tracks on this that just people cite as, just some of his best. And it is. It's a very just focused, clear, but it's still very ambitious. Lyrically, it's wonderful. Great storytelling, great songwriting, great vocals, great performances. This was a big hit album for him. It contains a lot of the same types of players I was talking about, a lot of great musicians. Linda Ronstadt was on this. Carl Wilson from the Beach Boys was on this. Really just, and then all the other people like, Lindsey Buckingham and David Lindley and Bobby Keys was on this album. J.D. Souther, Bonnie Raitt. Lots of beautiful talent, but great songs, just period, from beginning to end. There's a couple songs that maybe I'm not that fond of. Like, isn't Nighttime at the Switching Yard on this album? Not a favorite, but Tenderness on the Block. And, of course, the title track. Wonderful, wonderful album. This was the album that just made him a commercial success. And like many artists who achieve commercial success, who already sort of dabbled in maybe alcohol and maybe some kind of illicit drug taking, assumption only. I don't know personal highlights, but I will tell you, because of something behind the scenes, the next album from 1980, Bad Luck Streak and Dancing School, was not as great of an album. It lacked the focus of Excitable Boy. It contained a couple of, in fact, I think Emptyhanded Heart, which is a beautiful ballad that has this vocal with Linda Ronstadt, and they're singing two different things, towards the end of the song. It's just beautiful. Just absolutely one of his best songs. Gorilla, You're a Desperado is another great song. Wild Age is another great song. Bill Lee is another great song. But it had some songs, I think, that were just kind of retreading some of his past songs. Not every artist can just, come up with something new and exciting. So I think that the album was a little bit less focused. I would still stand by it. I just don't think it was that great. And then the cover version of a song called A Certain Girl. Not particularly fond of the song or his recording of it, but the B-side was Empty-Handed Heart, the song that I told you about that featured Linda Ronstadt. That song should have been the A-side because it's just touching, beautiful. One of the best things Warren Zevon has ever done. Interesting thing, and I hate doing this, but I did an interview with Linda Ronstadt. Okay, I'm dropping names or whatever. And I brought the song up. She could not remember, did I do something on that album? So I actually, she had requested for me to send the file to her so it would maybe remind her of the song. And she responded, and she said via email, and she said something, and I'm not going to quote her here. I love the song. I don't remember recording this, but I should have done it on one of my albums. I found that very interesting because with me, it's just one of his best. In fact, there's a song on the album, by the way, called Jeannie Needs a Shooter, which was a Bruce Springsteen song that he never finished at the time. So Warren sort of took it and added a little bit to it, and it's credited to Warren Zevon and Bruce Springsteen. After that album, I think sort of his star fell a little bit because, Excitable Boy, this is a great album. Bad Luck Streak and Dancing School. I guess it lived up to his title. Then he released a live album, I think, towards the end of the year, and that was called Stand in the Fire. Now, I'm not a fan of live albums at all, but this has two songs, actually three songs, that were not released elsewhere. The title track, Stand in the Fire, which is great, absolutely great. Then a song called, I think, The Sin, which I don't think is great. It's a standard rock and roll song. Then he does a medley, Bo Diddley's a Gunslinger / Bo Diddley. I stand by this record just for the title track alone. And the album, the group does sound hot and they're on fire. But like I said, I'm just not a big live fan. It took another 2 years before he put out another album for Asylum, and that was called The Envoy. In many ways, I think this is, even though as an album it's better, I think it ties with Bad Luck Streak and Dancing School because the high points of Bad Luck Streak and Dancing School lift it a few notches, and I think The Envoy is solid. The Envoy seems, a lot more. Well, the title track is definitely more political. He's always touched on political things, but I think that, it's really hard, this is not the quality of the first two albums. but it's still solid. So any of these studio albums you can walk into, just know that the first two are the best. The Envoy, it does have some great songs. A lot of the same great players. I mean, Hula Hula Boys off of the Envoy is fantastic. Let Nothing Come Between You should have been a huge hit. But then again, for 1982, it did kind of sound out of place. Even though he was doing these great layered songs, I guess they didn't sound in the same league as Flock of Seagulls and whoever else was popular, who I all love. I'm not knocking that stuff. But the Envoy was the last album he put out for Asylum. Still solid. All these albums are solid, but I put them actually self-titled, Excitable Boy, and a tie between Bad Luck Streak and the Envoy. There was a compilation that came out quite a few years later called, I think, A Quiet Normal Life, the best of Warren Zevon, and that had, you know, what the label or Warren considered the best of these Asylum albums. There's also a 2 CD Rhino set called I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. Disc 1 is the Asylum Years. Disc 2 is the Virgin Years. I think the Asylum stuff is the best stuff of his career, and that's just my personal opinion. But you know what? I'm not going to talk about Warren Zevon anymore. I've talked enough. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit more, but I'm going to show you the CDs that I have. And then right after that, I'm going to play a medley of songs from the albums that I've just talked about. And then I'm going to give this a look and a listen. And I will see you on the other side. And the self-titled album, this is the digital remaster. This is a 1976 release, and the second disc contains demos and lots of great tracks. This is a stellar album and needs to be owned at all costs. Really wonderful. 1978 was his big album. This is the one with Werewolves of London came out. And this digital remaster does have bonus tracks. It's a single disc, though. But still, you need to add that to your collection. It's a fantastic album. Bad Luck Streak and Dancing School from 1980, I don't think it was ever digitally remastered. I think the original CD that came out is the only one, and which is very strange, because even the live album from 1980, I think as well, Stand in the Fire, the title track is incredible. This does have bonus tracks on it. And finally, from 1982 is the Envoy, and this is his last album for Asylum, and that has bonus tracks. So there was a compilation called Quiet Normal Life, but I think this might be the best thing to track down, called I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. And the Asylum Years takes up disc 1 of that compilation. And those are my Warren Zevon CDs. Now let's listen to some music from Warren Zevon.
Keep on riding, 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 wanking Jesse James. Keep on riding, 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 till you clear your names. Keep on riding, riding. All these people with no home to go home to, they all like to spend a heartbreak motor on Bombay gin. I'll sleep when I'm dead, straight from the bottom, twisted again. I'll sleep when I'm dead. What? Don't the sun look angry through the trees? Don't the trees look like crucified thieves? Don't you feel like desperados under the eaves? Well, he went down to dinner in his Sunday best. Excitable boy, they all said. And he rubbed the pot roast all over his chest. Excitable boy, they all said.
Rolling the headless Thompson gunner. Rolling the headless Thompson gunner. Rolling the headless Thompson gunner. Talking about
I was gambling in Havana. I took a little risk. Send lawyers, guns, and money. Dad, get me out of this. Ha! Ah, ooh. can tell you. There's a certain chick I've been sweet on since I met her. What's her name? I can tell you. Then I throw down diamonds in the sand. Then I throw down diamonds in the sand. Then I wild age, wild age, wild age, wild age, wild age. Stand in the fire, 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 stand in the fire. Don't let nothing come between us. Yeah. Don't let nothing come between us. Nuclear arms in the Middle East. Israel's attacking the Iraqis. The Syrians are mad at the Lebanese. And Baghdad does whatever she please. Looks like another threat to world peace for the envoy. That's why I'm looking for the next best thing. Looking for the next best thing. I appreciate the best, but I'm settling for less. So I'm looking for the next best thing. Let's sing it.
And that is my overview of Warren Zevon, The Asylum Years. I hope this entices you to check out the music of Warren Zevon if you haven't already, or maybe it will inspire you to go back into your collection, pull those records, CDs, cassettes out, and give them another listen. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.